Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Oasis Focus on Finance show. I'm your host, Shafiq Morton. As always, it's great to be with you. In today's show, we're going to have a look at what happens when you reach retirement age. Lots of decisions, drawdown rates, tax, and of course, legacy funds. To help us understand all of this are our guests today, Masud Harneker and Zahrah Cachalia. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam, Shafiq.
Zahrah, when we reach retirement age, it's decision time and it's also adjustment time. Tell us something about the adjustments that are necessary for this particular transitional phase.
So, Shafiq, thank you. We're always told to work hard and save diligently for retirement. And then at some point when we reach retirement age, we're able to start living the retirement that we've envisaged over our many years of saving and investing. As with all other cases, you need to start with a clear plan and a strategy of how you intend to generate this income that will last over the lifetime of your retirement. So the income that you're generating needs to weather the effects of inflation. It needs to account for financial market volatility and also for any unexpected expenses that may come up, for example, medical expenses. Remember that it's always a good idea to start saving early and to plan for a long retirement. It's quite likely that today's healthy 65-year-olds will live into their 80s or even their 90s, and so it's likely that you'd have to account for 30 years of retirement, and without careful planning, you would have to rely on family members or the state to supplement your income. And as we know, with the current pressure that the state social security system is under, the income that you generate or that you receive from the state may not be able to sustain your needs into the future. And so you need to make adequate provision for your retirement.
Masud, there's a word that comes up here. Zahrah mentioned it, inflation, capital letters, uppercase. Explain how we defeat inflation in this whole process.
Sure, Shafiq. When constructing a retirement plan, one would need to take into account the effects of inflation, which would reduce the real value of your retirement savings over time. Inflation would have a significant impact on your retirement savings over the, say, next 20 or 30 years. During your working life, you'd receive annual increases in your income to account for the effects of inflation. But if this inflation rate continues during retirement, then your retirement savings would need to be sufficient to fund these annual increases. This would also have other important considerations. One would be the drawdown rate that you elect during retirement. Because you do know that if you select a lower drawdown rate, you would have a larger pool of assets invested. And this asset would fund in future increases. It's very important to remember, Shafiq, that the percentage of income that you draw down, if that exceeds the real return of the portfolio that you are invested, then your capital starts to become eroded over time. So it's important for policyholders to have a very prudent approach when selecting your drawdown rates. Just to give a simple example to show the effects how a relatively low rate of inflation can have a significant impact on the purchasing power of your retirement savings. Let's assume an inflation rate of around the upper band of the central bank's target, which is around 6%. In this case, if you take an amount of 1 million rand, that would be roughly worth around just over 290,000 rand in real terms after 20 years. That is why, Shafiq, it is very important to plan and start saving as early as possible to account for this impacts of inflation and effectively protect your lifestyles from the impact of inflation.
Now, Zahrah, Masud has emphasized that investment is a long-term process, but something that happens over the continuum is something called volatility. How do we cater for volatility?
So naturally, Shafiq, when there are negative market movements, it can be unsettling, especially when you're in a position where you're relying on what you have saved over time to provide you with an income for the rest of your life. However, it is quite important to note that your retirement strategy would need to sustain you for over 30 years. And as such, you would need to ensure that your investments are exposed to sectors of the economy that's going to generate a real return. So history suggests that while financial markets do have upward and downward movements, they do provide the greatest long-term return. So that is why we suggest that retirement savings need to include a portion of assets that are exposed to financial or equity markets. If we consider the behavior of share prices over a long period of time, we realize that the volatility as a percentage of your aggregate return reduces to a risk that is quite easy to manage. And the risk may also be aided through diversification strategies. So that is investing your assets in different markets, different sectors, we expose it to different currency denominations. And in that case, if one of the markets are experiencing an upward trend and another is experiencing a downward trend, it nets off and you have a relatively stable return.
So it's a question of different eggs in different baskets.
Something like that, yeah.
Masud, something else that is inevitable as anything in life is Sars and Texas. Obviously, there is a whole tax regime involved in this. How do we understand it?
Shafiq, if you receive tax benefits for contributions made towards retirement funds, where your employer and your employee contributions effectively reduced your taxable income, then you need to pay tax on the income you receive from your pension annuity. In this case, you would be a regular taxpayer, which means that the amount of tax that you would pay would be dependent on the tax tables that get published every year. It's also worth noting, Shafiq, that during this stage, in most cases, your mortgage is paid off, large expenses are paid off, which means that you could probably be able to withstand a lower level of income during this period. But at the same time, this also implies that your taxable income during this period is lower than the taxable income during your working life, which in essence means that the retiree would also enjoy a lower tax liability during that phase of their life. It's important also to remember here, Shafiq, that if you are a member of a pension fund, then you are allowed on retirement to take 1/3 in cash as a lump sum. With the remaining 2/3, you have to purchase a compulsory pension annuity where the fund value exceeds an amount of 247,500. It's also important to note here that when your 1/3 cash lump sum that you do take on retirement, where this amount exceeds 500,000, then the retiree is liable to pay tax at a rate of between 18 and 36%. So in effect, it's not always advisable to take the full 1/3 in cash, because the taxes can be quite punitive. So I would stress here, it's highly recommended that you consult a financial advisor before taking a cash lump sum withdrawal to guide you through the process, and he or she would be able to give you professional advice on this matter. Shafiq, on the other side of the spectrum, if you are a member of a provident fund, you are allowed to take a full cash withdrawal. We do not advise this because cashing in your retirement savings, there would be massive tax liability on the retiree. So once again, we would stress the importance of consulting a financial advisor to guide you through the process before taking out your cash withdrawal.
Zahrah, to get back to you, we're talking about R&R, not rest and relaxation, but rules and regulations. And there is a permissible withdrawal or drawdown on pension funds. Just talk us through this. It looks like this actually protects us against eating up our money prematurely.
The minimum and maximum drawdown that is allowed by South African law is limited to between 2.5% and 17.5% per annum on the value of the capital invested. So for example, if you had to invest 1 million rand, you could draw down an annual gross income of between 250,000 and 1.75 million, which is a massive difference. Unless you have a particularly short life expectancy, it would not be a good idea to draw down anything close to 17.5%, as you could risk eating away into your capital, as Masud has mentioned earlier. Doing a simple math calculation, if you're drawing down an amount higher than what your return on your investment is, that is naturally going to erode away your capital. So you should elect to draw down a rate that is closer to 2.5% than to 17.5%. And in most cases, we do recommend that you stick to a drawdown of around 6%, but it may change depending on your unique circumstances, because obviously certain people have certain needs that would have to be taken into account. But we do recommend that you stick to a conservative drawdown rate of around 6%. To maintain this drawdown rate throughout retirement, we do suggest that you invest in a balanced fund. And importantly, you review this investment on an annual basis to see if any of your circumstances have changed or any adjustments need to be made to your portfolio or your drawdown rate.
Let's go to you, Masud. We're talking about legacy funds. We mentioned it at the beginning of the show. So how do we go from this point to create something called a legacy fund?
Shafiq, with most living annuity contracts, the remaining assets within the fund can be transferred to a beneficiary, which in effect means that the fund itself is in a legacy form because of the fact that you can nominate beneficiaries. With regards to drawdown rates, Naturally, the higher you draw down from the investment, the lower the fund value of that investment is that you would have left over to your beneficiary. Once again, it's very important here to stress that the investment portfolio that you select would be crucial. We suggest that you look at investing in a low equity balance fund such as the Oasis Crescent Balanced Stable Fund, because this fund provides investors with a high level of diversification, stable growth, and a steady stream of income.
Zahrah, take us through the key points of what we've discussed in today's show, the issue of when we reach retirement age, there are several options, and of course there's a lot of wisdom in the way that we have to do things.
So, as we've noted, everybody's situation is different and everybody is unique. So there's not one strategy that will work for all investors. You therefore need to determine the relative importance for you of growth potential versus income needs and flexibility in order to identify a strategy that would work for you for your retirement. And this process needs to start well before you take retirement, and even probably as soon as you start working life, because the longer you save, the higher the growth potential in your retirement. However, there are many trade-offs. So, for example, if you want a higher growth potential, you need to compromise on some of your income. However, if you'd like to take a higher income, then that decreases your growth potential and in turn your flexibility in the future. You also need to consider your family history in terms of longevity and what your life expectancy could be, and account for a longer retirement. So when you sit down with your financial planner to discuss your retirement, you need to identify your personal financial goals and your objectives. And thereafter, you need to construct a basic retirement plan to ensure that you have enough money to last you throughout your retirement. You also need to consider the proportion of your investment portfolio that should be allocated to an emergency fund, and the effect that this would have on your growth potential once again, and on your portfolio. When discussing your investment portfolio, you would also need to consider the mix of growth versus income producing investments that could balance out your financial needs. Thereafter, it's very important to set up regular reviews with your financial advisor to ensure that you account for any change in circumstances or any unexpected life events. And once you've taken care of that, you can then start to enjoy a long and a happy retirement.
Sounds good. And just very quickly, the importance of a financial advisor. These are qualified people. Somebody's uncle's brother's cousin's mother's son is not a good financial advisor.
Yes, indeed, Shafiq. And at Oasis, we have fully qualified financial advisors who are well equipped to be able to deal with these kind of scenarios and guide you in the right direction when making decisions about your retirement.
Zahrah and Masud, shukran. Thanks for being on the show. And that concludes today's edition of the Focus on Finance show. A special thanks to our guests, Masud Harneker and Zahrah Cachalia. We were talking about decisions you make when you reach retirement age. Should you wish to watch this or any of our other shows, you can log into the Oasis Crescent YouTube channel, or you can catch us on LinkedIn. Should you wish to contact us, you can dial 0860 100 786 or email info@oasiscrescent.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Shafiq Morton. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.